you're going to need a pen because it's mightier than the sword. Um, if you don't have a pen, that's okay. You have a cell phone. You can type things on it if you want. So you're going to need a pen. You won't need it right away. Um, and maybe a piece of paper, but you should have one because we hand them out. um, and if you don't have a pen and you can borrow mine, but I only have one. So anybody? Pen? Oh yeah, good, good. We do need a paper. Pass that back. You didn't know you were going to be in school this morning. Okay, I wanted to do, I almost said, a straight ahead Thanksgiving sermon. I'm just going to re-embrace the sermon because I never know what it is exactly. Is it a teaching? Is it a talk? Is it a rambling? I'm just embracing the sermon this morning. So I'm going to do a straight ahead Thanksgiving sermon, which is called Red and Blue Brain, or Beyond Red and Blue. What did I call it? Beyond Red and Blue, Gratitude in the Earth. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're going. And as all Thanksgiving sermons start, I want to start, let's see, 164,000 years ago. There's a cave. It's a cave in South Africa that is 164,000 years old where human beings live. That's a long time, 164,000 years. Think about it. America's 250 years old. Jesus was around 2,000 years ago. The pyramids are 5,000 years old. 164,000 years ago, human beings were living in a cave in South Africa making jewelry. And they found shells with little holes in them where they were making jewelry out of seashells. Why? Why were they doing that? I don't know. I wasn't there. That was my archaeology professor used to always say. He'd say, well, why? He's like, I don't know. I wasn't there. But an observation I might make is that there's a kind of creative and artistic relationship with the earth itself in that single image. There's a dance between human innovation, human creativity, and the way things are, the earth itself, 164,000 years ago. So there's something in the human spirit already that appears in the oldest caves that we know of. Actually, there's some older ones, but the oldest caves that we know of where there is art, there's a dance. There's a creative dance happening. Let me mention some other caves, some of my favorites. There are some cave paintings in Indonesia that are 39,000 years old. Think how old that is. For some reason, I find that I get very excited. 39,000 years ago in Indonesia, human beings were making cave paintings of the human hand. And some of the anthropologists and archaeologists who worked on this, they didn't touch the cave walls because they're very precious, but you can see an image of the archaeologist with his hand next to this 39,000-year-old hand, painted with material made out of plants. Why? I don't know. I wasn't there. But there's a kind of creative dance that's happening with the earth itself, with the materials of the earth, and this exchange. It's very humbling. And of course, you have the cave paintings in France, which there's a wonderful documentary out about it. You should see them. You should see the documentary if you haven't. And they are 35,000 years old, and there are entire scenes of bison and and horses, and they're hunting. They seem to be hunting images. There are also a couple human images in there too. One half human, half animal image is also in this cave. This cave, you might be able to make some more guesses about what's happening. There seems to be a kind of sacred conversation happening in art between the hunt and being a human being. How are we able to live on this earth? There are also lions in there. I just remember some other images. It's a dangerous place and a beautiful place, and we are in deep reciprocal relationship with these wild beings. That seems to be something like what's going on in this cave. And by the way, I'll just now give you a little bit of the Kent Dobson interpretation. I take these cave paintings and even these shells as a kind of prayer. It's a kind of prayer. And I put in some Anne Lamott today. She says you only need three prayers: help, thanks, and wow. Okay, that's it. So your prayer life is done as long as you can say something like those things. And I actually hear or see in these paintings and images something of help or thanks or wow, or maybe all three. So some other ones in Bulgaria, there's a cave that's 8,000 years old that has the first that we know of fertility dance. Men and women in a kind of circle painted on the wall doing a kind of fertility dance, as best we can tell through interpretation. Also, a calendar that's 366 days. These people are in deep relationship with the earth itself, with the year, with the calendar, and they're putting it on their walls. They're not even their walls. They're just happen to be where they're either living or some sort of sacred ritual. We're not sure which, or maybe both. Why do human beings act like this? What is it about the deepest sense of what it means to be human that needs something like help or thanks or wow, a kind of prayer life that honors the deeply reciprocal and interconnected relationship of all things? I don't mean we need to use fancy words like interconnected reciprocal relationship of all things. A human hand will do on the wall. What is it about our human nature that's like this? And that makes me think a bit about Thanksgiving. Where did such a thing come from? Let's throw out any story you've heard about it. Okay? Now there's a story, I know kids come home with little construction paper versions of this story. Okay? And we're all, not all, some of you are sophisticated liberals. We know it's not the exact story, and it's so forth and so on. I don't even care about that right this second. I'm asking, why is it in the fall? Yes. If it wasn't Thanksgiving because of pilgrims and Native Americans, it would still be there. Something would happen where we would spontaneously need to produce something like Thanksgiving. Why? Because we have been in a reciprocal, interdependent relationship for 164,000 years at a minimum. Connected with the cycles and movements of the earth. And this, by the way, is in the Hebrew Bible too. There are 7 major festivals in the Hebrew Bible. All of them, except one, although there's a little bit of debate about that, is connected to the agrarian cycles. And right now we're in the fall, which is the season of Sukkot. One of the reasons why, by the way, the Jewish calendar is a combination of lunar and solar. It's a combination. It's not a pure lunar calendar. That the Muslim calendar is pure lunar. That's why their major festivals can be at different times of the year. But the Jewish people couldn't do that because you can't have a fall harvest festival in the spring. So they made up a month, and they throw it in every once in a while into the calendar to make it adjust. That really is the case, by the way. They invented a month to keep this lunar-solar balance going on. Very sophisticated. And Sukkot is the fall festival. And you brought up things to the temple from the land, from the full blazing summer. As things begin to become ripe in the ancient Near East, you bring that stuff up to the temple and you celebrate a bit of help, thanks, and wow. Particularly thanks. And Sukkot has prayers for rain, which is help us. Because if it doesn't rain in the rainy season, we're screwed next year. And wow, we didn't make any of this stuff. That's what prayer is. Help, thanks, and wow. It's deeply in the rhythms. And something like a harvest festival is in every single culture that we know of. Because there's an honest and humble recognition that even if we put things into the ground, we did not make them grow. They grew of their own accord, based on their very nature. And we can only control it so much. Even contemporary modern farming, with all of this sophistication, is wildly dependent on the weather, correct? Farmers know that. We tend to forget that when we have Meyer or whatever. A lot of modern life, it gets us out of sync with such a things, which is why we need cultural corrections like Thanksgiving, which is like, hello, you do not sustain yourself. You are sustained by beings, meaning plants and animals and wind and rain and sun and so forth and so on. So Thanksgiving is something that I'm suggesting is as old as humanity. By the way, I liked this Anne Lamott. I pulled these Anne Lamott quotes because, first of all, I love the way she writes. And she is inviting us to be astonished in sort of the everyday and ordinary miracles of life itself. And she also sort of in the second paragraph makes a comment, you cannot help turning toward a kind of service. But what's her exact language? Gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. It almost always makes you willing to be of service. To feel gratitude, man, I am sustained, you want to pass that on in some way. By the way, Sukkot, Harvest Festival in the Hebrew calendar, includes that as a practice by saying, do not cut the corners of your field. Leave them for the poor, the widow, the alien, and the orphan. You cannot go out to your field and hack everything down and put it in your barn and say, I'm the man or the woman. You can't do that. You have to sink into gratitude, to say, I am grateful that I'm sustained in this way, helps you turn toward an act of service. So don't cut the corners of your field. Leave them for the poor, the widow, the alien, and the orphan. Because they're just as interdependent as you are. There's a lot of wisdom in these traditions. And of course, a lot of wisdom in the Thanksgiving tradition, like Black Friday. Do you see how disturbing that is? I'm going to get a freaking good deal thanks to slave labor in China. I know that was a little dark, sorry. But not untrue. So what is it about this time of year? What are we being invited into? I think something of Thanksgiving, at its best, breaks the ego a little bit. It does. It cracks it by saying, you're an interdependent being. Once a year, you got to say, I didn't sustain myself. By the way, how do I get into this? When I was a kid, it was our obligation to pray before meals. Why? Because there's a cave that's 164,000 years old. Now, that's one reason, but some of it was sort of doctrines and worldviews that we had, but we prayed before meals. I'll give you my prayer as a kid. Here it is. And I tried to say it as quickly as possible. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this food. Bless it to our bodies. In Jesus' name, amen. That was my prayer. Then we could eat. It didn't matter who did it at the table. Mine was the quick version. Other people who were feeling more spiritual would go into great detail about these things. But I threw in the basics, and you had to put it in Jesus' name, otherwise it wouldn't work. That was the feeling. And it always made me a little bit uncomfortable, but there was something that I'm suggesting is deeply human about pausing just before you stuff your face toward gratitude. That is pretty deep and pretty old and also pretty important. And I've gotten away from that specific ritual, but as you know, sometimes I'm gone and I do these wilderness psycho-spiritual programs with Bill Plotkin and some others, Animas Valley Institute. That's where I am sometimes. And you know what we do? And by the way, most people in there aren't very religious. Many of them don't come from any kind of Christian background. Some of them, live in Santa Barbara and have spirit names, okay? Not exactly my fundamentalist circle. You know what we do every single time just before we eat? Somebody stands up and says something like, I want to thank all these many beings and the farmers and the wind and the rain for sustaining us in this way. It's the exact same thing. Just the impulse is the exact same thing. And Thanksgiving is a marker of that. Don't forget, you are sustained by all things. Whether or not you believe in some sort of ultimate creator, you're still sustained by wheat and raindrops and air and all that kind of stuff. So to say yes to Thanksgiving, I think is important. I really do. I think it's important. It's a marker. It breaks our ego a little bit about who's in control. Just once a year, here it comes again. And we get to celebrate all the awesome things that came out of the earth. By hardly any influence of our own, just by virtue of being these amazing beings. So what would I say? Thanksgiving is something about our interdependence, and I think it's a kind of realignment, what I might say. It realigns us to something, to some more, I think, humble way of being in the world. It helps straighten that out, perhaps. Which leads me to another observation by Ram Dass. This is what Ram Dass says. If you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your family. Yeah, which is the other side of Thanksgiving. Like, oh yeah, I get all that nice stuff about the earth, but I got to sit at this table with these freaking weirdos. And I think there's perhaps an invitation about alignment too, and our relationship with any other. Could be other as turkey, or other as green beans, or other as earth materials, but also the other of another human being. Here I am, face to face with the enemy. Maybe your family's different and everybody gets along harmoniously and it's all unitive oneness. I doubt it. Here I am at this table with these other beings. And what I think is so... let's talk a little bit about the drama of the most recent election. And I mean the theater of the news media. Because something happened called an election, where you write things on a piece of paper and you count them up, and then you see who the winner is. It's like, and by the way, people who are against competition still think voting is a good idea. But it's a competition. And it's a competition that's complicated and complex and nuanced because it has to do with values and systems and all kinds of things. But nevertheless, that happened. But the drama that is displayed on your television screen, or if you're like super sophisticated, I don't have cable. Yeah, but I can watch everything that's on cable on my laptop, which is what I was doing. And as you saw, if you watched the news, they have a map of the United States that's red and blue. Okay? It's all red in the center. Ooh, scary place. It's all nice and cozy blue on the coasts, okay, with a little blue thrown in, Wisconsin or something, and a couple other places, a little bit in the Midwest. Not much. Red and blue. And then, if that's not enough, they shrink everything down to states, and they put all the counties. Oh, there they are again, red and blue. And then sometimes a county is blue, and then it goes red. You're like, oh! Or the other way around. By the way, that's all manufactured drama. It's all 100% theater of the absurd, rooted in fear. All of it. They're just counting things, and when it's over, we'll see who won. That's all that's happening. But the drama is what sells, so we love it. We the people who are like, oh, I don't watch sports, that's too much, competition. They were still glued to their freaking TVs around the election. It's the same thing. It's the sports. It's the Lions and I can't think of another team. The Bears, okay? I do like sports. Anyway, I'm getting very excited right now. I need to calm down. All right. So this drama is kind of forcing a dualism in our culture. And the dualism is fueling all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to the Thanksgiving table, it doesn't really work that way. If you're very honest, the person across the table from you is a mystery. You're a mystery to yourself. Even your own views and values are more complicated. Even if there are some, cliches and stereotypes. Right? Your personal views and values are complicated. Same with the person across the table from you. And I'm going to suggest that you listen to sometime. There's a podcast I like called Hidden Brain. Sometimes you get little sections of it on NPR. They do a short version of it. Then there's a longer version, Hidden Brain. And they did one recently called Red and Blue Brain. It's really worth your time listening to. And research psychologists and neuroscience scientists have been doing a series of studies over the last few years about the way people react to stimuli. And they're able to determine, even on brain scans, that people tend to have a disposition toward being conservative or liberal in the way their brains work. Now, nobody really likes the conclusion of this research because we think it's all about education. If they would have gone to this school and had different parents, they would all... It doesn't appear to be the case. And it's not overwhelming. It's something like 30 to 40% is rooted in what we would think of as DNA, disposition. 30 to 40% conservative liberal. Now, that fact alone, we could have a whole conversation, which we did in the 9 o'clock about this. I'm just throwing it out there as a detail. When you sit across the table from somebody, their disposition to the world is just their disposition to the world, the way they react to stimuli. And some people tend to be a little bit more drawn toward order. Some people tend to be a little bit more drawn to openness. That should change the way we view people. It really should. And this is science. And I've seen the stickers on your cars about science and facts. Okay? So you say you believe these. So what's the invitation here? The invitation, I think, in a very practical sense, is this Thursday, you're going to disagree with people, most likely, especially if you're at a large family gathering. And there might be some heated debates and discussions. Just remember, something like 30 to 40% of another human being is just the way we would say they're wired. I don't really like that because it's kind of a computer metaphor, but there's a certain way in which the brain is structured. And the way in which the brain is structured is not good or bad. How could you say that? In fact, the big dance of culture is always between innovation and order. It can't all be innovation. Otherwise, there's no innovation. Because innovation is rooted in its relationship with order. And it can't be all order, otherwise it grows stagnant and doesn't work. We know that. And that's a little bit of what's even going on in politics. If we can get away from the drama and the ridiculous fear-based dualism that both sides are using to win the argument. Across the table, at Thanksgiving, there's going to be a mysterious human being. And you're a mysterious human being. And this is what I think is the great leveler about Thanksgiving, both mysterious human beings, even if one is wrong, are still deeply interconnected to the earth itself. Nobody gets out of that. And Thanksgiving is the leveler of that. Here it comes again. You're sustained by beings greater than yourself. The earth community. Terra. Of which your own body is made up of. And will be here for a while and then be gone. Just like your turkey. Seriously. People don't think about it. We bring death into the center of the table. Look, death. That's your challenge in Thanksgiving, to come out, say, behold, death. Set it down. I have a very weird brain. I promise you I've never thought that before until just right now. It's not in my notes. Okay, which leads me to a journaling exercise. I want to do something a little bit different because gratitude is only something that can be practiced. It can only be practiced. How do you practice gratitude? You practice gratitude. So we're going to try it. So I'm going to give you a series of 4 questions. And I want you to write without thinking too much. Just the first few things that come into your mind. Just start typing. Or start writing. And if you don't have a pen, start thinking. Okay? Here's question number 1. I want you to finish this sentence. Some things I love about the earth are. Some things I love about the earth are. Start writing. Don't think. There's no quiz. Some things I love about the earth are. Some things I love about the earth are. Okay, here's another one. When I was a child, I loved being, and the sort of the invitation is here, a place. Like where? Where did you love being as a child? When I was a child, I loved being. Where did you love being? When I was a child, I loved being. When I was a kid, I loved being. Okay, here's the next question. The next invitation. Something I appreciate about myself is. Something I appreciate about myself is. Something I appreciate about myself is. And here's the final invitation here. Someone who helped me believe in myself. Fill in the blank. Or maybe it's more like a sentence. Um, Someone who helped me believe in myself. Just fill in the blank. How many people come to mind? Someone who helped me believe in myself. Who's that person? Okay. Gratitude is something that can only be practiced. Just look at your list right now, if it was a physical one. These are things you were not grateful for until you put it down. Not that you couldn't access gratitude, but by bringing these kinds of things to mind, there they are. There's the prayer of thanks. And I have two things I want to say. I want to give you a homework assignment, because it's like school after all. And I want you, between now and Thursday, to practice gratitude with saying something like, one thing I'm grateful for is. That's it. One thing I'm grateful for is. And see how many times You can do that between now and Thursday. One thing I'm grateful for is it's to rev you up for Thanksgiving so that you're actually grateful when it happens. When you bring the death turkey to the center, you will have had at least 4 or 5 days of practicing. One thing I'm grateful for is. And the reason why I think this is such an important practice actually has something to do with Anne Lamott. Our culture is so sick right now. But listen to her language again. Gratitude begins in our hearts, like one thing I'm grateful for is, and then dovetails into behavior. That's an interesting sentence. It starts by saying, I'm grateful for something, and then our behavior, it's followed by behavior. It almost always makes you willing to be of service, which is where joy resides. We know that. Gratitude seems to be the doorway into that. So that's the homework assignment. And as Nicholas comes up in a second to play, between now and the time he does his lovely plucking, I want to invite you to, right now in this moment, turn to the people around you and say something like, one thing I'm grateful for is. Now, if you're an introvert, I'm sorry. I actually really, because so much of, now I'm going to get into an extrovert introvert thing. I'll just leave it in an apology. I'm sorry. But turn to the person next to you and say, one thing I'm grateful for is. And that'll be the way that we'll conclude the teaching time. Thanks.